Every year, there are tons of F1 prediction videos out there, and nothing against them, but I wanted to switch up the format a bit. Today, I'm going to drop 50 predictions, some tame, some bold, and some you may think, well, obviously that's going to happen. But it makes it different things as good, and we can see how many of them become true at the end of the season or not. Not only does this diversify the stuff I am making predictions on, from big things like the World Champion, to very nitpicky things like the number of safety cars, but it also gives a good video to look back on at the end of the year and decide to see how dumb or smart I really was. So what I've done here is taken my 50 predictions and separated them into 5 categories. The first being driver and team results, the second contracts and driver moves, the third about the new regulations, the fourth a bit about finances, and finally ending it off with some random fun ones that I threw in. Not all of these categories have the same amount of predictions in each, as most of them come in the first two, but a little bit of organization is needed. I'm going to list them off pretty quickly and give a little bit of my thought process, but they are predictions, so the thought can only go so far. And the rest of it is just kind of friendly guessing and preference, so if you have predictions of your own, leave them in the comments no matter how outrageous they are. Most of my predictions are going to be dumb, and that's what makes it fun. So if you think to yourself, wow, this guy's really an idiot, that's kind of the point. Anyways, to start out, I'm going to go with the most anticipated prediction first, and that's the World Champion. And I'm not going for Lando Norris back-to-back, I'm not going for a 5th for Max Verstappen, and I'm not going for an 8th for Hamilton. I'm going for George Russell scoring his first World Championship. Mercedes is projected to have a strong car, and George Russell has some of the most momentum and skill going into the 2026 year, and if the car does end up delivering, I don't see a world in which George Russell can't close out the championship and claim his first. Following that Mercedes prediction, another one to do with their engine specifically is that I think all 4 Mercedes-powered teams will finish in the top 6 of the Constructors' Championship. Both Mercedes and McLaren are expected to be there, and Williams ended last year in 5th, and it is known that they were primarily focused on 2026, so Alpine is the only team that needs to improve a lot. Going from 10th, I think the engine change is what they needed, and the difference between that will catapult them up the leaderboards. Next is that Isaac Hadjar will be the closest teammate to Max Verstappen since Daniel Ricciardo. It only makes sense that a fresh restart in regulations will be the closest a teammate can get to Max in terms of the car being tailored towards him, and based off the momentum Hadjar's carrying into the season, I'm pretty sure he'll outdo Verstappen's teammates in the past, but then again, it's not the highest bar. Now back to Mercedes-powered cars, and specifically honing in on Williams, I really think they're going to be a stunner this year, and to the point that I'm guessing that they'll achieve their first win in the sport since Pastor Maldonado won in Barcelona in 2012. They allocated resources to 2026 incredibly early last year and have one of the strongest driver duos on the grid. And following a 5th in the Constructors' Championship last year, in a year that they thought they were riding off, I think if things fall into the right places, Williams can stand on top of the podium this year. As a matter of fact, that brings me into my next claim, that I think there'll be multiple first-time race winners in the sport this year. Whether it be Alex Albon winning one, or Kimi Antonelli, or Isaac Hadjar, I think there'll not only be one of these guys to win, but I think multiple can. With so many new engines and 2 new teams, the floor of what drivers can achieve in the new year is crazy, and multiple new race winners is a bit of an optimistic thing to hope for, but I can see it happening. But it doesn't end there. I also assume that a team will achieve their first race win in the sport. That could be Aston Martin achieving their first under the new branding, or Audi somehow pulling off a win, or even something crazy like a Haas win, but I do think it can happen. Now this might be one of the many stretches I have on this list, but I really think it can happen if a team like Aston Martin has a breakthrough with Honda, or Audi somehow shocks everyone. And with so much chaos up and down the grid, something like a Hungary 2021 situation could happen again, and the team most ready could pounce and get a win off of it. Now, one that I'm sure will turn some heads is that a Lance Stroll podium will happen. Now, I know everyone hates Lance Stroll, but I can't be the only one who would find it hilarious if Lance Stroll just whipped out a podium for the first time since the Racing Point days. It would silence all the haters, provide for a field day on social media, and overall just be a pretty funny sight to see. After all, if that car does turn out to be as good as any other Adrian Newey built machine, it's not super far out of the question. Similarly, another driver that people tend to count out that I think will do well this season is Franco Colapinto. After his crash-happy stint in Williams and no points last year in Alpine, people discount Colapinto, but he did do a lot better than I think people give him credit for. The Alpine car just wasn't doing him any favors. I think this year Colapinto proves why he's on the grid and does enough to get him back on the grid in 2027. Now for the final driver prediction that I think they'll improve massively, and I'm saying Gabriele Bortoleto will solidify himself as one of the top drivers in the sport this year, and massively carry Audi. Now this isn't a stab at Nico Hülkenberg in any way, I'm just really high on Bortoleto. And in this new Audi team, he has a lot to prove, and if he lives up to the hype I give him, I could see him being around a similar caliber to some of the drivers that are considered on the higher end of the grid. And he could be the Audi lead driver for the foreseeable future in their F1 program. Now enough with the sunshine and rainbows, and now I'm going to go into drivers I think will underperform. The most underwhelming driver on the grid in 2026 will be Esteban Ocon. Not only do I think Haas will be a bit slow compared to other teams, but Ocon was just outdone by Ollie Behrman last year. And I'm not hating on him specifically, but someone has to fill the bottom slot, and to me, that'll be him. Joining him in that underwhelming category, well, not really, and this is somewhat normal to predict now, but I think we'll see another year of multiple pole positions from Charles Leclerc, but no wins. I don't exactly expect Ferrari to be great this year, but that is something that can be mitigated over a one-lap pace, and Charles Leclerc does typically do that. But it is much easier to overcome a bad car over one lap than an entire race. And I think he's shown us that in the past, and this year will probably follow suit. Now into the predictions about team battles, and I have a few takes here. First is that I think Arvid Lindblad will beat Liam Lawson, which isn't too crazy to say, but a prediction nonetheless. Also, I believe that the duo between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri won't be quite as close this year, and Norris will pull ahead of Piastri in the points department a bit, and end the season a good bit above. Finally, I think the closest battle we'll see between teammates, and the one to watch for to see who gets a seat in 2027, is Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez. As with a new team, they'll be fighting for every good result they can possibly get. Now my last little subsection of this first category of results is the team performances. When it comes to the two new teams of Audi and Cadillac, I think Audi will place higher out of the two, even though they are building power units from scratch. And as a matter of fact, I assume Cadillac will struggle in the opening part of the season and be the final team to score their first points. That doesn't mean I think they'll end last, just last to achieve their first points finish. Also, for Red Bull, I do expect that they will be fast with their new Ford engines. Maybe not the top, but still fast, but will be riddled with reliability issues. The other two team takes are ones that I hinted at earlier with Haas and Ferrari, as I expect both to be a bit lackluster. I think Ferrari might have their worst season since 2020 and be outplaced by teams like Williams. And I do think Haas will start the season well, as they typically do, but end off the year with the worst performing car out of the lot. This tends to be the case with Haas, as they usually deliver results in the early part of the season, but struggle to keep up with upgrades. Now into my second category, which I've labeled contract and driver moves. The first prediction here is one that's pretty obscene given the past couple of years, and that's that there will be no mid-season driver changes. It seems like it's been a while where that isn't the case, but unless Liam Lawson's capabilities fall off a cliff or Franco Colapinto really struggles, I don't see it happening this year, but it tends to change extremely fast. The next prediction is that the top three of F2, in no specific order, will be Rafael Camara, Nicolas Solov, and Colton Herta. And you are probably saying, that isn't an F1 prediction, and you're right. But it ties into my next prediction, and that's all three of those top drivers in F2 will be announced for a seat in 2027. I think Rafael Camara can make a break for the Haas seat, Solov for the RB, and Herta for Cadillac, making for a pretty successful F2 campaign in 2026. Along with that, I think there will be a team principal that gets sacked in the middle of the season. Which one, you may ask? I have no clue, just one of them. I got the feeling. Along with that, I'm going to make the guess that another person that gets sacked midway through the season is Yuki Tsunoda. He's already had issues with his reserve contract, and I could see Red Bull relieving him of his reserve duties midway through the season, But who would take his spot? That brings me into the next one, where I think Red Bull will panic sign junior drivers to not only fill that reserve role, but also just have more junior talent, as they really don't have much at the moment. They just dropped some talent recently, so they kind of need to sign more juniors to stick to their typical ways of having half of the grids on each of the junior categories. Now, a bit of a rogue one, but now that Cadillac is in F1, I could see more rumors of a 12th team joining F1, and because Cadillac got the bid, they think they'll be inclined to do the same, but it'll probably get denied. Now, the final three for this category, the first being that one driver will retire, whether that be Nico Hülkenberg, Lewis Hamilton, or even Max Verstappen. I think one driver will end up calling it quits at the end of 2026, but one that I don't think will is Fernando Alonso. Despite his age, he just seems a bit too stubborn to leave, and I think he will end up signing a contract extension with Aston Martin and continue making young drivers salty that they can't find their way into an F1 seat. Finally, in that seat alongside Fernando Alonso, we'll probably see rumors of Lance Stroll leaving F1 or going pro in something like underwater basket weaving, but he'll remain in Aston Martin no matter what rumors arise, and he'll be there no matter what. At this point, it seems like he has to be forcibly removed to get him out of F1. Into the third category, we have predictions to do with the new set of regulations. The first is that there'll be some sort of issue with the new active arrow. Now, I'll be honest, my understanding of the new active arrow is a bit blurry at the moment, but I'm sure myself and many others will understand it a bit better once we see the cars on track. But from what I understand, it's driver controlled whether they have the flaps open or not, and there has to be some sort of issues that arise with it being open and closed at the wrong time. I mean, we saw Jack do it in Suzuka, so there kind of has to be some sort of problem with the system as it's completely new to the sport. One other thing that I think will fail to be addressed is the system in the heavy rain. The aim of the new cars was to go away from ground effect and therefore reduce spray from Venturi tunnels, but I'm not too sure the changes will address that very well. We've seen the wet tires be basically cosmetic in past years, and regardless of the changes that are being made, I don't really see that changing. Now, another thing I think these cars will fail to do is make racing more interesting at street circuits like Monaco. Monaco really is an unsavable race in the modern era of F1, so it isn't really a surprise, but I also think this will be the case in the new race at Madrid. Madrid seems to be another tight street circuit with limited overtaking opportunity, and I am expecting it to be a bit boring. Now, with the concern of congestion on the track, it'll probably be an even larger problem now with 22 cars out on track. With that being the case, I presume there'll be more penalties dished out for impeding in qualifying, and a lot more traffic. Also, there's sure to be more safety cars and red flag moments in the new regs, as there are more chance for it. And 2025 didn't have much as it is, so many races going without safety cars is easy to top. Now, the final predictions for this category have more to do with the design of the cars, and with the new regulations, I expect to see something similar to the 2022 Mercedes Zero Side Pod design, where a team's going to make a radically different design from the rest of the grid, and either pay off big or suffer because of it. My guess would be Aston Martin with Newey, but it really could be anyone. The last two are actually to do with the liveries, and some have been revealed already, but I just have a feeling Mercedes is going back to black liveries. There really is no reason, and it doesn't matter whatsoever, but as an honest guy, I need to stretch this to 50 predictions somehow. The other one is that at some point this year, we'll see an AI-generated livery. Whether it be a one-off or a main livery, it just seems like something that's going to happen in the modern day and age. The truth is, we probably won't ever be able to confirm if this happened at the end of the year, but I'll still lock it in regardless. Now, second to last category is what I label finances. And I'll keep this part short, as I'm sure some of you just heard finances and yawned. The first thing is that Toyota will buy a percentage of Haas, as Toyota has had more involvement with Haas as time has gone on, and they've voiced how they regret withdrawing from F1 back when they did, so I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted ownership in the team. Two more come from sponsors, where I think every team will end the season with a title sponsor. The only team that doesn't have one right now is Cadillac, and I'm sure come the end of the year, they'll pick one up, and the other teams will either retain or get new sponsors. Specifically looking at Williams, I think they'll get a big new sponsor, maybe not a title one, but still a big one, that awards a lot of money and will give them a bit more financial freedom that they've been looking for to help contest with the top teams. Finally, the cost cap is going to prove once again that it's purely cosmetic, as I feel that 3 or more teams will go over this year, and not be reprimanded in any way that affects their points or results. A new set of regulations means more things to spend money on, and in the past, teams have gone over when that isn't the case, so this one just seems a bit obvious to me. Now for the final category, and that's just random fun stuff. 2025 was the first year in a long time that we didn't see an appearance from a reserve driver, and not that I'm wishing anything bad upon the current drivers, but I believe a reserve driver will make an appearance in 2026 and score points. With high-profile names like Leonardo Fornaroli and Zhou Guanyu, if one does happen to make an appearance, they have a solid chance at scoring some points. After that, we're getting into some teammate debacles, and the first will be Mercedes. With Mercedes projected to be at the top, and them having a past of choosing a first and second driver, I think they'll be faced with making a choice this year, and whichever driver they do side with is beyond me, but I don't think that they'll follow the path of equal drivers if faced with the issue. Now for all the Drive to Survive fanatics, I predict we'll see a teammate incident as well somewhere upon the grid, and it will cause some friction. Not much thought going into that, just purely a guess. Now going back to my reserve guess from earlier, the reason I think a reserve will make an appearance is that I think a race ban will occur. Ollie Behrman currently sits at 10 penalty points, and 12 gets a race ban, and at the rate he's accumulated them, I think a race ban is going to happen for him this year. Now 2 takes about how the championship will play out. First is that every full-time driver on the grid will score points this year, and that the championship will be decided in the final round in Abu Dhabi. Finally, the last 2 predictions of the video both have to do with the F1 higher-ups, and that's the fastest lap will make a return for 2027 and peace will be restored, and the F1 will announce a 25 race calendar for 2027, and it won't be received well because 25 races and sprints on top of that is just a bit too much for these teams. Now that wraps up my 50 predictions for this coming year. Most of them probably won't be right, but if I went safe, you probably wouldn't have made it to this part of the video.